Appreciate everybody being here. It's good to see everybody come in and start connecting immediately. A lot of old friends around the table, and but we are here to do some work. So we've got limited time, so I'll keep us kind of moving as best we can toward our objectives here. But just wanted to first start by saying thank you for taking the time to be a part of this and jumping on with me and Lou and Robbie and what we're trying to do. I'll tell you just a little bit about what this is. I know we've sent you a lot of materials, but we'll do that, and then we'll kind of go around, do a little quick round of introductions so we can jump into what we're here to do. But this is part of the National Association of School Boards of Education, State Boards of Education's High School Transformation Initiative. All right, and transformation is a good thing. I know that can have a negative connotation sometimes for some folks, but this is about getting better, and you can't get better without transforming, without changing. That's what we're talking about. We've got so many good things in place, but we still have to transform to get a state to a better place in a high school experience. And we look at improving things like the high school engagement, the high school attendance even. You know, these are things that we want to talk about as we progress down these 4 meetings worth of work. But this is, we were selected to get some support and do this work. It wasn't that we wanted to do this. We engaged outwardly to do this. We were asked if we wanted to be part of one of 6 states in the nation to kind of undergo a team approach of policymakers, of existing school leaders, to take a look at what we do and how we do it and how we scale, I think most importantly, how we scale the good things that are being done, how we scale the policy changes that are intended to drive innovation and change. So you know, we'll kind of go through this initial meeting and try to level set and frame our expectations for how to do this work and how to best not only make changes within our individual areas, but how we leverage existing resources to scale and sustain these changes across a system of high schools across the Commonwealth. So let's take just a moment, and I'm not sure the best way to do this. Maybe we can go around the table, and then we'll invite folks online. Just tell us who you are and who you're with as we go around. We may do a better icebreaker and get a little more personal next time, but since we're just here to jump in and learn and with limited time, let's just kind of go around and say who you are and who you're with. And if you don't mind, we'll start over here.
It should be on, Chris.
Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Chris Sanders. I am the Executive Director for the Office of Educational Programs, which runs the Everybody Counts initiative. And Everybody Counts equips high school students with a personalized career plan and confidence in their career skills so they can achieve those career goals.
And you didn't say also an upgrade from Jamie Link.
Oh.
We appreciate that. Since this has been recorded, I can say
Yeah,
those.
right. Yeah, the secretary will appreciate that.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lieutenant Governor Jacqueline Coleman, former high school teacher, basketball coach, assistant principal, and really excited to be a part of this.
Yay.
Robbie Fletcher, commissioner, former superintendent, academic team coach, principal, math teacher, physics teacher, and whatever else was assigned by the superintendent.
You were a mathlete, right?
Yeah, nerd.
I played baseball and coached baseball.
It's funny. I've heard from his old Moorhead days that he played basketball like a mathlete.
I kept score.
My name is Justin Pate. I'm the president of Elizabethtown Community and Technical College and also a Kentucky State School Board member. Former K-12 educator, football coach, English teacher. So, you know, already we see the depth of experience and breadth of experience going around. Lou?
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to see you guys online, those of you here today. I am Lou Young, 30-plus years in P-12 education and teaching and school administration, and now at the University of Kentucky in the College of Ed, but the very proud vice chair of the Kentucky Board of Education. And high schools are my jam, so I'm really looking forward to this work.
Good morning, Amanda Ellis. I'm the Senior Vice President in the Council, Senior Vice President over Student Access and Success at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. with a majority of my years in K-12 here at KDE, 6.5 years, and then former principal and teacher. So a mix, definitely.
Ma'am.
Good morning, Robert Moore. I'm in year 26.5 of education.
But who's
Former
counting?
former high school teacher, middle school teacher, elementary principal, and I'm currently serving as the chief of schools for Jefferson County Public Schools.
All right, come around on the line. Jesse, if you wouldn't care, we'll start with you and move around.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jesse Bacon, currently superintendent at Bullitt County Public Schools, just south of Louisville. Former high school teacher, basketball, football coach, principal, and did a small stint as a middle school principal as well. I've got my director of secondary schools with me as well. I'll let Amy introduce herself.
Morning, I'm Amy Compton, and I'm the Director of Secondary Education here in Bullitt County Schools, former high school principal, high school guidance counselor, and high school teacher.
Thank you all. Lakeisha?
Good morning, everyone. Lakeisha Miller with the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, serving as proxy for Ashley Watts for this first meeting. So really excited to be here. Ashley will plan to be at subsequent meetings, but happy to join you all today.
Appreciate you being here. Granny?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Corinne Murphy. I'm the Dean of the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences at Western Kentucky University. And before that, there was special education teacher, autism inclusion specifically, behavior analyst, and faculty member along the way.
Well, listen, really appreciate you all being here, and everyone was included with a specific purpose. This is all a range of individuals representing entities that matter to the landscape and the policy landscape that shapes the guardrails for what a Kentucky high school can be and can look like. So, you know, while we're in these meetings, I think it is important that we push each other and pull each other, you know, getting out of comfort zones, because that's the danger in a lot of these policy environments is everybody wants to stay in their comfort zone and ask everybody else to change. You know, we're all going to have to be open to this. You know, I represent KCTCS and one of our 16 colleges. But if we're doing something stupid, you need to tell me we're doing something stupid or we can't address it. And I've got to be okay with that. Well, I have to say this, speak of something stupid. John Ballard has joined us.
Oh,
Ouch.
hey, John.
Ouch.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you,
Guilty
Pate.
as charged. Took me a while to figure it out, the technology, but I did it.
Well, listen, really glad you're here. John, why don't you do a little intro? We just got finished with intros, and we're just kind of getting ready to get started on some of the meat, talking about how we've got to get out of our comfort zones and all of those things. John used to tell me all the time when I was doing something stupid, so his perspective will be valued.
I appreciate that. My name's John Ballard. I currently am serving as the Senior Education Policy Analyst for the Kentucky Senate. So I'm here today on behalf of Senator Gibbons, but retired public school administrator for 33 years, the last 7 as superintendent in Elizabethtown. And so I work closely with Dr. Pate. He and I have served on a couple of committees together on a workforce crisis task force. And so I'm pleased to be here.
And again, appreciate everybody being an active participant. And I think, you know, one of the things that as I have come onto this school board, I have realized there's a lot more possibilities than I realized.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as I was talking about being a part of this board, I think I had a formulation or a set of formulated ideas of what change I wanted to see as a result of being on the board and having some input in state policy, only to find out that about 2/3 of everything I thought I wanted to change was already in place and existing. So I think a lot of what we need to do as a team here is take a few moments to level set and understand, and I tell you, we're going to go over it a little bit later, but this Kentucky Innovation Guide, I think, is a very important document. And if you've not gone through this, I highly encourage you to take a look at this. This outlines a lot of what is possible in the Commonwealth. But I think we can level set a little bit with where we are, some of the things that we do have as possibilities from a policy environment to help transform the Kentucky high school. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lou Young, who will begin kind of helping us get the landscape here. Dr. Young?
Excellent. Thanks so much, Justin. I have a few slides to share, if we could pull those up. Right after the slide for the goal of Kentucky high school transformation. And I want to start by thanking all of you for being here. When I look across the agency representation here, from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce to the Education Professional Standards Board and higher education, to school district leadership, to the Cabinet for Education and Labor, our Lieutenant Governor, representatives of the Kentucky General Assembly, our largest school district, and the Department of Ed and the State Board of Education, I can't think of a better gestalt of representation on a team than what we've pulled together for this conversation. So thank you so much for that. As Dr. Pate mentioned, this is critically important work, and your perspectives matter a lot. I personally would encourage you to talk to a lot of people about this conversation around high school reimagination or high school transformation as we move forward. Your commitment to Kentucky's young people indeed will shape the future of Kentucky. Chris was mentioning he's got 10 years to get it right for his own kids as they go through the P12 system. So that's what we're all about. Today, though, I'm here to talk about Kentucky's participation in the NASB High School Transformation Network, as well as contextualizing this work in the larger vision of Kentucky's work around Kentucky United We Learn. And to our surprise and delight, we have with us the President and CEO of the National Association of State Boards of Education, Dr. Paolo Di Maria, who's in the audience with us today. You won't be able to see him, but he's here paying close attention, and he's working with our board as we have meetings today and tomorrow as well. So Paolo, thank you so much, and heartfelt thanks to NASB for including Kentucky in this work. The opportunities for us to collaborate with California and New York and Indiana and all the states in the network have really inspired us to think about how Kentucky can, in fact, continue to lead the nation in educational transformation and reimagination. Over the last several years in Kentucky, under Kentucky United We Learn's banner, we have engaged hundreds of, maybe even thousands of Kentuckians, students, families, educators, community leaders, government officials, and others in shaping a new statewide vision for public education in our state. And we call it, play on our state motto, Kentucky United We Learn. That vision is built on a simple truth. When we place students at the center, when we connect learning to purpose and community, and when we create school environments where young people feel known, seen, and challenged, we create school environments where young people thrive. Kentucky students always rise to the occasion. But United We Learn is not just a slogan, it's not just a website, it's not just a poster. It is a commitment to innovation, equity, and authentic community partnership. And it is the foundation upon which this high school transformation effort stands. Are we able to get those? Oh, I see, I can see them behind me. All right, I was looking in front of me, sorry. Next slide, please. We are guided in this work by Kentucky's definition of vibrant learning. I use this slide all the time, so if you will, just take a minute to read it. It is such a beautiful statement about what we believe about learning and teaching in Kentucky. The Kentucky United We Learn Council receives all the credit for this definition. The tagline is learning that matters to students. We could also say learning that matters to employers, learning that matters to government officials, learning that matters to families. It is this kind of learning that Kentucky United We Learn is all about. We have three legs of our stool: vibrant learning, innovation, especially as it relates to assessment and accountability. I'll talk about that in a minute. And deep community engagement at the local level and at the state level. So those are hallmarks of the work that we have been engaging in now for several years in Kentucky, at least the last 3+ years. As I mentioned, a critical part of that work is vibrant learning that is deeply relevant, connected to real-world challenges, interdisciplinary, and focused on student agency. I often tell people if I had my P12 career to do over in the classroom, I would teach first and foremost for agency. I want my own 4 grandkids as they go through the system, or as Evelyn matriculates through the system, I want them to be more agentic year over year over year. I want them to own their learning. I want their learning to be relevant to their interests and goals and their cultural wealth. Again, all of that embodied in our definition. Vibrant learning is what prepares students not to only master content, but to solve problems, work across differences, and lead with purpose. It is the kind of learning that makes school meaningful. It's the kind of learning that will help us crack this chronic absenteeism problem, and it's the kind of learning that today's Kentucky students are asking for all the time. Next slide, please. Another critical part of that foundation is the Kentucky Portrait of a Learner, our statewide promise that every student will leave our schools equipped with the competencies they need to thrive in 2025 and beyond. These competencies, you'll see them here: engaged citizenship, critical thinking, effective communication, empowered learning, creative contribution, and productive collaboration. These competencies form, along with the content, this is not an anti-content movement, that's why empowered learner is at the top of the key in our graphic here, but it's this kind of learning, as I mentioned earlier, that makes schools relevant to kids and engaged in their communities and reflect what communities say matters the most. They represent what employers, colleges, and families tell us are essential for success in a rapidly changing world. I also want to refer to the innovation that we talked about. I think this is the next slide, please. Sorry, I'm not turning my pages. Yeah. So Kentucky United We Learn started out with a moonshot to build a prosperous Kentucky. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful for all of our learners. In your resources, I want to call your attention to this report from the National Governors Association called A Roadmap to Something. Sorry, I've lost the first page of it. There it is. Let's Get Ready, Educating All Americans for Success. Roadmap for Governors. This is the 24-25 work of Governor Jared Polis, the chairman of NGA this past year. In that, we learned that the call to states is, in fact, to rethink how we measure what matters most to communities. We hear so much discontent with the No Child Left Behind era assessment and accountability that really narrows curricular focus down to reading and math and content areas and doesn't represent the breadth of the kind of learning that we must demand in this age of 21st century and beyond kind of skills. To quote from the report, it says, "We have a measurement mismatch between the skills, knowledge, and traits we want our high school graduates to have when they walk across the stage and the things we invest in and measure." So even the National Governors Association has recognized across the U.S. the need for better data collection that look at a robust set of inputs and outputs that will, in fact, better match the needs of the workforce across the Commonwealth and across the U.S. So that's been the work of assessment and accountability, and we are moving forward with hopeful support from the General Assembly in the spring session to look at ways that we can move forward around competency education, alignment with our Portrait of a Learner, skills and competencies, as well as, of course, still the requirements of the federal government around reading and math in grades 3 through 8 and once at high school. So finding a balance in this mismatched world is what we're after in our new assessment and accountability system. So we're excited that we've made really significant gains in that regard. Next slide, please. So why high schools and why now? As I finish up, I want to talk about the need to transform high schools based on some data. Justin Pate is a data hound. He says all the time, show me the data. What do the data say about that? Have you dug into the data? And so we wanted to make sure that throughout our time together, we are sharing lots and lots of data with you. This is just some surface stuff right now, but to punctuate the need for high school transformation in 2025 over the next few years with NASB, I want to talk about what appears that Kentucky's doing pretty well in a lot of different data points. Our most recent, just released last month, 4-year cohort graduation rate stands at 93.5%. That's the 4-year rate. And the 5-year rate is 94.2%. And please don't miss this. This reflects a lot of hard work on the part of our students, on the part of educators, high school principals, Amy, high school guidance counselors, Jacqueline, high school assistant principals. This represents a lot of hard work over time. We don't have diploma mills in Kentucky anymore. We have high school graduates who are succeeding through the P12 process, and then we face the gap. So please remember, these numbers do reflect effort on the part of all of those educators, and nothing that we're doing in this initiative is about heaping blame or guilt on the high school process across Kentucky, all the folks involved that. But graduation rates don't tell the full story. About 53.3% of Kentucky high school students, Amanda, enroll in college in the fall after graduation. In the Kentuckiana region, Robert, it's only 43% of 2023 graduates who enrolled in a Kentucky post-secondary institution. Of those who did not enroll, about 72% were employed within a year, 72%, but often in jobs that do not offer long-term economic mobility. And while our 6-year post-secondary completion rate has risen, and we're really excited about that, at a faster rate than the nation, Dr. Ellis can share, it has risen to 62.2%, placing Kentucky among the fastest improving states. This reflects outcomes for students who do enter college, not the nearly half of students who do not. So the message is clear. We are graduating students at high rates, but many leave high school without a clear path to a credential of value, without strong connection to career opportunities, and without the assurance that they have durable, transferable skills needed in Kentucky's evolving economy. And nobody on our team can better describe that than Dr. Ellis, so we'll definitely be picking her brain throughout this process, and Dr. Murphy. There's also this confluence of focus around high schools, and I'm the old lady in the room, and I'll tell you, we haven't seen a look this deeply into high school since the early 1990s. And so when I talk about that, I want to share that there is a national research urgency around the high school experience. Our own Pritchard Committee here in Kentucky just released their 2025 Meaningful Diploma report. And that report, it's included in our resources, it reminds us that a diploma must represent more than time spent in classrooms. It must represent evidence of readiness, and this report calls for performance, competency-based models, and authentic demonstrations of learning that allow students to show what they can do, not just what they have completed or seat time. Similarly, as I mentioned earlier, the National Governors Association Let's Get Ready report further sustains that same message. And Lakeisha, as you know, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation's work around durable skills like our own Portrait of a Learner, communication, problem solving, leadership, creativity, and collaboration, all align directly with Kentucky's Portrait of a Learner. Employers tell us repeatedly that these durable skills, Portrait of a Learner skills, matter just as much as technical skills and content. We must hear that. Taken together, this research confirms what Kentucky leaders have long known. The structure of high school, designed more than a century ago, all of us studied Committee of 10 in high school or in College of Ed, that structure is not built for the century we are living in. It must change. So this is where Kentucky's participation in the NASB High School Transformation Network becomes so powerful. Through this national partnership, Kentucky will join a coalition of states committed to building new models of high schools, models that integrate rigorous academics with experiential learning, vibrant learning in Kentucky, that expand access to dual credit and career pathways, that honor student voice, and create multiple ways for students to demonstrate mastery. This initiative also advances our commitments to United We Learn. It strengthens the work happening across our local laboratories of learning. It aligns to our statewide Portrait of a Learner, and it supports the implementation of vibrant learning in classrooms. And it amplifies Kentucky's leadership on the national stage by sharing the insights, innovation, and community-driven strategies we've built together. This partnership helps us deliver on the promise to redesign high schools that prepare every Kentucky student for successful transition to college, career, and life. And we invite our agency partners, policymakers, government leaders, business partners, higher education, and local districts to work together, not in silos, but a unified system. 2 more paragraphs, Justin. I know he's watching my time. Let me be clear. This work is not about mandating a single model or standardizing innovation. It is about creating the policy space, the support structures, and the shared vision that allow many excellent models to flourish across our state. Rural, urban, and suburban communities, regular comprehensive high schools, specialty high schools, A5 high schools, area technology centers, all of them have different strengths, opportunities, and needs, and we gain the most ground when we empower local leaders to build on those models. So this work is a promise to our young people because Kentucky students are telling us time and time again, this is the kind of learning they want, this is the high school experience they want, and they want learning that matters. Thank you for your leadership and your partnership, and I hope, I'd be happy to answer questions, but I hope that puts us into the right headspace as we move together today.
That's important level setting and framing. And I tell you what, we can pause for questions. I think what Dr. Fletcher is going to present
yeah.
really just carries on through
Agreed.
that. So if you don't mind, we'll transition to Dr. Fletcher with Innovation Guide.
Thank you so much. And before I get into Innovation Guide, I think it's very important for us to, again, as Dr. Pate points out, level set. Where are we now? I want to share a few stories with you. And the blessing of being commissioner is I get to visit schools and see what's going on. And I'm going to give you a few examples fairly quickly here. First and foremost, go to Madisonville North Hopkins, the Freight Box Challenge. The students in the ag and also in their carpentry class and their math classes, they work together to build, to take one of the 40-foot long freight boxes, and they've redesigned it and built a medical office. Okay? That medical office now sits in Liberia, Africa. It is the only medical office in that community, in that region, in Liberia, Africa. And now they're in the process of building a second one. Talk about global learning. Talk about critical thinking. Talk about project-based learning. That is learning that matters to students. It's vibrant learning. In E-Town, John, you'll appreciate this. In E-Town, the community came to their engineering class and said, we're having issues with garbage in Freeman Lake. We need your help to fix that. We want you to design a lake Roomba that will clean the lake, take it to an area, and then dump it elsewhere. So their engineering class is in the middle of a project that are learning, GPS, working robotics, working with other areas, taking the knowledge and skills and putting it together to solve a problem in the community. Vibrant learning, relevant to the community. Eastern Kentucky, talk about collaboration. You have several school systems in Eastern Kentucky and in other parts of the state too that have the tiny house projects where they're building tiny houses to, your engineering classes are designing the tiny house, your carpentry class is building the tiny house. You have your electricity classes are wiring the tiny house. Your art classes are painting the tiny house. Your business classes are managing the budgets for those tiny houses, and then they put those out to auction and then try to and see how much money they can get to go back into the project for next year for a new tiny house. And then how can we design a better tiny house, if you will? And like, for example, I've seen second iterations that would have solar panels. But this is bringing funding back into their classes and back into the work. And what's even the best part about this, we have students that are, once they graduate, are starting their own businesses building tiny houses. I'll go to Jefferson County, did a visit to Jefferson County. 2 young men who were wrestlers getting ready for a wrestling competition. I think it was at Western. Wrestling competition later on that day. They were taking their consumer science classes. They were taking everything they could in culinary, but also in business because their goal was to have a food truck together. And one of them recognized he was a better business person. The other one recognized he was a better culinary person. They needed to work together. But they were coming to school every day because every day they were learning something that made an impact on when they left school. I'll close with the ideas with this one too. Barron County. We have a teacher in the 4th grade that recognized one of his kindergarten students, and again, this student is now, I think, in third or fourth, I think he's in fourth grade now, but when he came in kindergarten, he was wearing a rubber glove. He didn't have a hand. They couldn't find there was some issues there with the family. They could not either afford or find a prosthetic hand for the student. There is a STEM lab there. They designed a robotic hand, 3D printed it in that fourth grade classroom. And now if the kid flexes, he's got a hand. It looks like, it's so cool. He looks like Iron Man. He's probably the coolest kid in the room, in the building. But if he flexes his hand one way, the hand closes. Flexes his wrist, the other way, it opens back up. The school system owns the design, and that student is now taking 3D printing as a fourth grader. And as he grows, they're looking at how to change that design, and that's 3D printed right there in that school. That is vibrant learning. That is learning that matters. And again, going back to the last thing, again, was with Jefferson County, you're going to see an example in our innovation guide that talks about their journey to success, how students are doing their defenses of learning based on their profile of learner. They also have the milestone projects along the way that also go along with what's going on in their classroom. But why are we learning, what we're learning, and what are we going to do with it? And then we're having students that are getting offered jobs and internships once they walk out of these defenses, not only in Jefferson County, but across the Commonwealth. But these are in pockets, and we need this to grow. Now, it is growing. So one of the charges here is how do we create a policy environment to make sure that all students get that opportunity, or to encourage or to promote those type of opportunities. And so with that idea in mind, we feel like it's very important to have a baseline. And what we have is the Kentucky Innovation Guide. And this document basically covers three topics essentially. Action areas, or levers, if you will. These are concrete approaches to innovation that draw from actual Kentucky districts that are implementing personalized learning structures for their students. And again, this guide was published in 2024, as you see on the screen, but those 6 areas that we're talking about starts off with first, creating portraits of a learner. The second action area, local assessment and accountability and innovation. And along those lines, we've gone through a process of town halls and working with our school systems, not only with school systems, but also with parents, with business leaders, with community leaders, with government leaders, with people across the Commonwealth to come up with a proposal for a new accountability model that we didn't go out and say, this is what we need. We're listening to you. You're telling us what we need. And so we're making that proposal to our General Assembly coming up already, and we've been doing a lot of work with that. But the second part of this will talk to you about districts. As a matter of fact, Dr. Bacon, I really applaud the work that's going on in Bullitt County with the pillars that you've put together as a part of your accountability model and the work that you put in. And I'm going to use a quote from you, and you can correct me. This local accountability process has reestablished faith of the community in our public schools. And again, I butchered that quote, and I'm sure that you could do a much better job, as I've heard you say it before. But this process builds faith within our community. There's transparency. So you have that second action area that's in this innovation guide. You'll see examples of districts across the state that are doing local accountability and assessments that are innovative, that are not just a paper and pencil for students. There's some competency-based education or projects out there where students are getting those opportunities to demonstrate what they're learning. The third lever or action area is effectively using funding to support personalization. You'll see a lot of information in there too about how districts are looking at funding options and how do we make sure that students are getting that personalized opportunity. Fourth, leveraging graduation requirement flexibilities. I'm happy to say that we have changed our graduation requirements to offer a lot of flexibility of what schools can do. For example, we're used to in the high schools that we grew up in, or that I grew up in, it was English 1, English 2, English 3, English 4. Now, based on the ILP, that English 3 and English 4 there can be something else that's related back to the career interest that the student would be interested in. It could be something about technical guides. It could be something about how to read for example, I'll use my son as an example. Would not read Shakespeare, but if you gave him a technical manual on welding, he would sit for hours and read that. And the grade level equivalency on that manual was very, very high. but it was what he was interested in. So again, making sure that we leverage those graduation requirement flexibilities. Also organizing and credentialing learning. And then finally, and again, Corinne, we're going to really rely heavily on you and Amanda to talk a lot about what's the teaching certification and professional development. What does that look like? How do we make sure that teachers are coming out prepared to lead classrooms like this? So again, those are like baseline areas. We wanted you to see that this is where we are, but now where do we go next? And I think it's very important for us to understand there's some great things going on in Kentucky schools. We can attest to that. But how do we expand that? How do we move forward? Are there obstacles? Are there things that maybe we need to do a better job of communicating? And again, there are examples from our Kentucky districts that show what exactly does change look like. Some districts are going through this change. What does it look like? And then how do we inspire districts to move forward with that? Then also, too, the other part about this guide, I think that it uses a good framework for us. It also gives us clarity on how policy flexibilities can be leveraged by schools and districts to seek those personalized learning opportunities. There are specific reference to statutes. And again, it'll give you that information so that everyone has kind of a baseline understanding of where we are, but also we're daring you to dream of where we can go. So I think it's very important. I can't emphasize this enough. There are so many awesome, vibrant learning experiences that are going on across the Commonwealth, and we want to honor those, but we want those to spread. But I think it's important for everybody in this community to say, okay, what's our baseline? You know, not every one of us are visiting classrooms each and every day, and things change year to year. So I think it's good for us to see that. As a matter of fact, this guy was in 2024. We could add probably hundreds of pages since then of other things that have been added. So again, I think that's very important. So as you look through this guide, I think there's some questions to think about as we go through. How do we strengthen local engagement? One of the things that in our moonshot talks about an accountability model that is relevant to all learners. The only way we're going to have an accountability model that is relevant to all learners is to look at the community in which they reside. Does the community value? What do they have available? How do we make sure that they know the place-based education is so important, that students understand what's available in their own community and what they can come back to? How do we communicate this? What are we doing a good job in communication? How do we move forward with it? What are other ideas? We don't want to limit you to these 6 action items. So keep this in mind, but I think it's a good place to work from as we move forward. How do we embrace project or competency-based learning structures? How do we strengthen alignment with post-secondary transition and success? What other questions you may have as we go through discussion? Now, we want to kind of walk into maybe a first day of what exactly is one of these key action areas. And I took some time to summarize the first one in case you haven't had the opportunity to look at the Kentucky Innovation Guide, but it really talks about our portraits of a learner. And the very first thing, when it's so important with a portrait of a learner, is creating a clear vision. So now, again, transitioning into the work, into what we're going to have discussions on, and one of our action items, again, deals with the portraits of a learner. Schools and districts must first develop a clear vision for knowledge, skills, and dispositions that learners need for future success. The vision helps set common expectations. Again, if you look at the profile learners across our district, the work that's gone on to develop those. And the beautiful, and I've got this other farther on in my notes, one of the beauties of this is we haven't required, it's not part of statute that every district have a portrait of a learner, yet we have 150 some.
160
Did we hit
yesterday, I
160?
heard.
Okay, we hit 160 out of 171 districts have a portrait of a learner. And this was not dictated by a statute. This was not dictated by KDE. This is buy-in from the local communities. But again, with that portrait of a learner, they have to articulate their aspirations. This document outlines what every student, let me rewind. The document from a portrait of a learner outlines what every student should know and be able to do when leaving the school. When you walk across that stage and get a diploma, did you just fulfill the graduation requirements? Or are you a communicator? Are you a collaborator? Are you a critical thinker? Looking back at the statewide profile learner. Community engagement is so important. Again, this is in that first section. The development of these portraits typically is a community-driven process. In order for it to be effective, it has to be a community-driven process. We have people that are, businesses, industries, post-secondary institutions, educators. There are lawmakers. I'll use Rockcastle County as an example, Kerry Ballinger in Rockcastle County. We have Senator Storm and Representative Bray that's a part of their local accountability work. And they're part of that drive of the profile of a learner. It's good to have all that buy-in and support, but it also shows broad support and sustainability. When you have the support of people in the community, it is sustainable. Once Dr. Bacon, whenever he decides to retire and do his doppelganger impersonations of McDermott from Buffalo, the Buffalo Bills, had to put that out there. Very sorry, Jesse. The next person up is going to continue this. Now, there'll be changes, but still it's so ingrained as a part of the community because it's what we've gone through. That's what's expected. Also, it's very important to have competency progressions. To operationalize the vision, districts create competency progressions that specify the knowledge, skills, and mindsets students need for academic, personal, and professional success, making the vision actionable in classrooms. What does the portrait look like for a fourth grader? What does it look like for an eighth grader? And how was their growth? What you identify as your indicators and your competencies and what that looks like in the fourth grade setting should be foundational. Then what is the growth for an eighth grader? Then what does it look like as a senior? So it's very important to see those progressions. But also you have to have, of course, alignment with the portraits and competencies. Also a part of this guide in the very first part, dealing with our portraits, I mentioned a little earlier, Kentucky does not require districts to adopt a portrait. But a statewide portrait was introduced in 2022. Thank you, Dr. Young, for pointing that out. And districts can choose to adopt or create its own. And that process is phenomenal. As a matter of fact, as a former superintendent, I was amazed that the people that showed up, and again, a lot of times we get kind of jaded and we think, okay, we're going to invite people, but nobody's going to be there. I had 2 former superintendents. I had the local county judge. We had the county sheriff. We had parents that we hadn't seen before that felt so valued and to be a part of it that they came out. But again, that was a part of the process. Again, the districts can adopt their own. We give them a guideline. We give them I won't say a template, but we give them a statewide model, but it needs to be their own. What are those competencies that they value in their local communities? Also, too, it's this first section talks about graduation requirements, and just a reminder, all of our Kentucky students have 22 credits across core subjects and required in civics, financial literacy, workplace ethics, and technology, and districts may add performance assessments and portfolios aligned with their portraits. Keep that in mind. What are the additional things that our districts are doing to align with the portraits? Can be additional graduation requirements. There's flexibility and innovation. State policies specify what must be learned, but policy doesn't state how. Allowing districts the flexibility to design personalized, creative learning experiences that foster mastery of the portrait's attributes and meet academic standards. And of course, we do have 2 local examples that will give that to you, but in a framework, you'll see the lever, the action step. You'll also see state policy that relates to that action step. But we want you to say this is, and you also have examples of where we are in some of our schools. How do we expand that? Or how do we make it better? So when you look at those type of things, that's what we're asking you to do. How do we evaluate and maximize this guide to transform the high school experience? So I think that moves us into an area of maybe some group discussion. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Pate.
Yes, thank you all very much. Any questions for Dr. Fletcher or Dr. Young before we move into some of our group discussion here? All right, Don, I think that was a very good job of summarizing a decade of work and revision and the policy advancement. But I also think it highlights what we're here to do, all right? And why does this time together matter? So to me, when you think about 10 years ago, I don't think school districts would get assessment and accountability credit for some of this project-based stuff. I don't think there was local flexibility for the business and industry community to impact curriculum. I don't think we had the flexibility for a school district to say, you know what, English 4, a student's going to have a business English option. You know, I think 10 years ago, we were still requiring Algebra 2 as a graduation requirement, you know, so we have made so many advancements, all right? So when we think about 10 years from now, you know, I think it's kind of a twofold thing. What else do we want to see as we recognize there are some challenges into incorporating this work? Do we need additional policy changes? But also, how do we take advantage of what we've got? Because I've gone around to some school districts, and, you know, Dr. Young mentioned the use of data. All right, and I've seen some school districts really using some data. I think it was
This
at
is the
Fern
longest
Creek.
I've ever seen you go without saying the D word, so look at you.
Well,
Wow.
I want to give everybody a chance here, Lou, but at Fern Creek, and you call those model schools or lab schools, what?
Academies.
Academies, the academy model. Okay, so we've got the academy model. Those academies choose their disciplines based on local, you know, business and industry need. All right, so they're looking at data. I don't know that schools were doing that 10 years ago. All right? I was a principal at an ATC. We chose our programs based on what instructor we could find or what funding we could get. All right? And a lot of times there was a moratorium, so even if we needed a program, we couldn't get an instructor for it anyway, so it didn't matter. No, these districts are doing things differently now. And I think for me, when I look at, you know, what we are here to do as this Transformation Network team, it's really about, are there policy recommendations that we need to make maybe to one entity or another? I think pointing the finger inwardly, you know, are we training future teachers in a manner that aligns to this new Kentucky framework? Or are we training Kentucky teachers the same way we did, you know, 25 years ago because the curriculum committees don't change curriculum? Okay, well, we need to look at that. That would be a policy recommendation. You know, John, there may be things, you know, as we look at as a legislature that need to change a direction a little bit, you know, and we need to look at those things as a result of some of this work. But I think policy recommendation is one. Another is, you know, are we sharing the best practice amongst school districts as we should? And I think one of the things that we can do is identify some of this best practice that we're going to uncover through our work and make maybe a top 5 list of best practices that we would recommend all Kentucky high schools utilize. One of which being, as Dr. Fletcher was mentioning, you know, we've got flexibility in the last 2 years of the English curriculum from a graduation credit standpoint. Yet I've talked to several superintendents since I've been on this board and asked, are they doing this? And the answer is no. And when I ask why, well, there's some not so pleasant answers. You know, well, the English faculty don't want to make these changes.
It's not tested.
Yes, and so there's where the assessment changes matter to all this. There's still districts who think they have to offer that because every student is not going to pass the test. You know, if they don't do that. So again, a list of best practice to go out may highlight the areas of opportunity that we have that some districts may just not know they can enforce or implement. All right, so, and then I think corollary to that, and this is where I think Jesse, Robert, you know, some of you all who are in the schools, John, certainly, what are those barriers? What are those barriers? You know, pushback from faculty, that is a barrier. Right? From teachers, that is a barrier. So, but we need to address that barrier. Are there others that exist? Are there things that Lou and I, as board members, think that we have just the perfect policy environment that absolutely does not work at the practitioner level? You know, we need to identify these barriers. I think for us as a committee, if we do these things and can at least create some momentum for when our work ends in the summer, as a team, it doesn't mean that mine and Lou and Robbie's work is done as a KBE. It doesn't mean that Lieutenant Governor's work is done in Frankfurt. You know, it's, you know, we can continue this on, but we have a chance to uniformly, together, create some togetherness in the recommendations that we are making, you know, as we return to the workforce or the cabinet for education and workforce, as we return to the Council on Post-Secondary Education. So let's take just a few minutes here, and we were going to kind of break out. But let's take a few minutes here as a group. I think we're small enough to do this, and just talk about some of the things. I think if you have just initial first blush thoughts in a policy environment as best practice that we need to make sure we're highlighting, or some barriers that you're aware of. You know, maybe we just throw some of those things on the table. And it could be something specific. You know, maybe you've got some ideas on how to enhance or better communicate the Portrait of a Learner process. You know, maybe there is some thoughts on the flexibility within the graduation requirements. You know, whatever these things are. But again, I think going back to our importance as a group, policy recommendations, sharing best practice, and identifying barriers. Let's take a moment and just throw out some ideas. And I'll tell you what, let's start, if you all don't mind, with some of our school-based practitioners.
Okay.
If you all have first blush thoughts, go ahead and throw some of those out.
If I could add something, Dr. Pate, I think
Yes,
it's very
sir.
important too, as we look at our practitioners, if you will, that's on boots on the ground. I think it's also very important to highlight what are some things that you've done to strengthen local engagement. So if there's some ideas that you have there that maybe that we can put on the table, what are some ideas that you may have that have strengthened local engagement when it comes to Portrait of a Learner? Or in other areas too, but with that focus on Portrait of a Learner, what does that look like? So again, everything that Dr. Pate said, and add in some of that guiding on how can we strengthen that local engagement when it comes to that work. So, Dr. Pate.
Robert?
Oh, sure. Just a couple of things. I think one, you mentioned the Academies of Louisville. That's probably our one of our strongest models when it comes to innovative and engagement with our students. And one of the things when it comes to local engagement, our high school team has done a wonderful job of involving local leaders and more importantly, business leaders. It's called the Guiding Team. We have hundreds of business partners that work with our schools, and they're meeting actually tomorrow morning, and they meet frequently. That's how we determine this is what we need coming from graduates of JCPS. So that local engagement is very critical. So that's the strength area, but that's again. It is a transformational model, the Academies of Louisville, but that's 15 of 27 schools. Mm-hmm. And there's variations between school to school. Variation is a good friend to inequities and achievement gaps. It is a good friend.
Amen.
So one of our barriers is closing the variation gaps. Mm-hmm. We currently have, I think, 3 high schools that are model academies. Some are wall-to-wall and some are specific model recognized by NCAC. So 3 out of 15 is not enough. We want all 15 to be model academies. So that variation, I think, is one of the barriers. And I think another thing that I think about when it comes to teachers that we are getting is that ability to a core content teacher to collaborate with our CTE pathway teachers. How do we connect the work and make it that meaningful diploma that you mentioned? That's what makes that diploma meaningful, that connection between that core content and the CTE pathways. We have CTE pathways in all our schools, not just Academies of Louisville. So that, I mean, every teacher that comes, if we can limit the time it takes to get them prepared to collaborate with CTE, and vice versa, because some of our CTE pathway teachers are not teachers. They didn't go to school to be teachers. So just kind of decreasing that gap of collaboration, I think, is another thing that first came to mind. I've taken tons of notes.
Just to punctuate Dr. Moore's point, this kind of formal coalition, the guiding team, I think is a best practice takeaway. So how do we have some folks, Lakeisha, from the local chambers of commerce to the state chamber of commerce and other community partners, higher ed? How do we have some folks who will step up and say, we're going to help build the high school experience in our community, mold and shape the high school community experience to meet the workforce needs in our region. So I think that's a great takeaway, and a shout out to Academies of Louisville. When NASB conference was held in Louisville in 2024, we took a national team to visit Wagner High School, and people were really pleased with what they saw there in terms of a CTE inside a high school, comprehensive high school approach. And I think there were a lot of takeaways from that.
And real quick, I do want to mention, this meeting is recorded, so we'll be able to capture all this best practice. And I've seen Glyptosand's pen moving pretty crazy back there. So let's just talk freely, and then we'll capture all this at the end. But from a leadership standpoint, to me, one of the most powerful things that they have done to increase that local engagement is they have provided a platform and a belief that the time the business and industry community spends with shaping that future direction is going to matter, because they have seen these model schools make changes to how they're teaching students, and that's only going to increase the engagement. So I think that's one of the most powerful things to highlight.
Yeah, and you speaking of leadership, and I do want to brag on the leadership of the schools as well, because you have the vision team as well of those academy schools that meet on a regular basis. And right now they are creating what's called guaranteed experiences. What are the guaranteed experiences? If you come to any Academy of Louisville school, these are the things that you will receive as far as internship, working alongside a business or a job of interest, or site visits, guest speakers. Like, these are guaranteed experiences. Any school, again, trying to close that variation gap. So the vision team, I think, is critical in our work with our academy model.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Jesse, you all have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Robert makes some really great points. I think one thing that we are finding here, in terms of the time that it takes to allow teachers to transform their practice from a more traditional mindset to a transformational mindset. And the example I would give, I think we've got great work happening across our career technical pathways and trying to integrate practices with projects, from content to performance, I would say, in those areas. But I think where we really struggle are those maybe higher academically minded students and experiences for those kids, and our teachers, our content teachers are teaching and assessing all of those students. So you got a math or an English teacher that's responsible for maybe 200 students a day who are in multiple different career pathways. And so I think we've got to really think critically about what we're asking our teachers to do and how we're asking them to transform, and then what opportunities are we providing them and space are we providing them to be able to start to change their practice, because this is extremely uncomfortable for them. We have found that at the elementary and even somewhat at the middle school level, we're more open to some of these transformational methods because these teachers are a little bit more well-versed in multi-curriculum instruction. The high school level, we've got content experts who learn by receiving content from a master teacher or from an expert, and they've not been immersed in experiences that we're asking them to provide for their students. And we're asking them to provide it in a multitude of different experiences, pathways, and opportunities for students. And so I think we've got to be really mindful about what we're asking them to do, the time we're giving them to do that, and then in what capacity that we're doing it as well.
Well, and I think that also brings up another elephant in the room, is these best practices will vary based on size of school district. You know, in a larger school district, it's a little easier to get like-minded students in a classroom and still have enough students in that classroom to dedicate and resource a teacher to be with that like-minded group of students. In a smaller school, if you've got a class of 20, you may have 20 different futures they're all working towards. So we do have to be mindful of the variance in the best practice recommendations by school type as well.
Context matters a lot.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
If I could add something too, to piggyback of what Jesse said, just from what I've seen with our content teachers at the high school level, they're very eager to do these things and to work, moving toward a transformational experience, that they have such concern over not teaching all their standards. So that might be an area that we can look at about standards. For instance, in English language arts, there's over 100 of those standards. So there's just a lot of concern about, if I move into a transformational mode, if we're looking at vibrant learning pieces or even authentic learning pieces, what do I cut out of my curriculum in order to do that? Or how do I ensure that students are gaining the knowledge and the expertise in all their standards, but yet applying it to something that is meaningful to them?
And I think some of that too is a result of some of the pressure, and it's not bad pressure, but it's pressure that our teachers feel from parents who expect their students to high so that they can have opportunities at the next level in college, whether that be for scholarship opportunities. And so there's a real pressure there for teachers to make sure that their students perform in a way that's going to set them up for the best opportunities at the collegiate level. And so I think that's also causing some friction in how we allow time to let this transformation happen.
I think that's really helpful. And I would just offer a piggyback on that to say, we need to think differently about the high school transcript and the admissions process in higher ed. We have an opportunity, a moment in time where so many of our universities have gone test optional, but we haven't really figured out how to leverage that on the P12 side of things, the high school exit side of things. So when I think about a transcript, we've got a basketball coach, a baseball coach, a football coach, a track coach. We got coaches we can throw a stick at in this room. And how often, except for our elite athletes, do kids get credit on a transcript for being captain of a team, an important high school experience? Do they get fitness credit for the conditioning that they do to prepare for that experience?
Leadership credential.
Leadership credentials. Those are experiences that are quintessential high school experiences, but we ignore that when it comes to that piece of paper when they exit. So really thinking broadly about the development inside school, on the field or the court, outside school, think about scouts and faith-based youth groups and all of the experiences. Lakeisha, think about part-time employees who are high school kids. I learned as much being a cashier at Gold Circle department store as I did in some of my high school courses, right? I learned a lot about how to deal with people. So I'll tell you all about high school, or about Gold Circle later. But yeah, so how do we think broadly about that transcripting of student learning experience as we hand them gently off to their post-secondary experience?
Well, and to piggyback off of that, I think we just have to be cautious not to lose the rigor and academic preparedness, regardless of where they go. Because
100%.
even the welding manual, Commissioner, that you talked about is not easy reading.
No, it's high
It is
lexile.
technical reading. And if you talk to our campuses right now, we do have test optional. So it's really opened the door for a lot of students. But there's also a huge cry for help and preparedness for students, especially in mathematics and in English and reading. And so, but mathematics is a cry for help. And so I just don't want us to lose sight that we are, and I'm a middle school integration girl from the get-go, but I don't want us to lose sight on the preparedness. And if there are students that the experiences are authentic to their desires, so it may be a higher academic track of what they're interested in, and that we give them that experience and exposure just as much as we do to any of the other work experience, and so I think we have to broaden our view on what I call promising practices because of context, right? Some things will work and some things won't, depending on it. The other thing that I want us to do, Dr. Pate, what I saw, because I was a part of the policy change from when we changed the high school graduation requirements. We did that exactly because we were in the ATCs. And so I took a picture of the physics formulas that they were doing in their very first course in, I think, electrician pathway. And I sent it to my husband who teaches physics, and I said, what grade? And he said, where are you? And because I always traveled with them. And I said, I'm at a school. what grade? And he said junior, senior, AP Physics probably. And I said, this is an introduction. So that's where we started digging into. So it wasn't about a course. It was about the standards. And so the standards should never, really standards are basement, sadly. And we haven't met some of those, not because of the accountability piece, but true preparedness. And so what we did is we were really encouraging people to be courageous, to look at their CTE courses and look at their academic courses to align, kind of what you were saying, to align and say, well, wait a minute, we are teaching these geometry courses, or these geometry standards and some of the Algebra 2 standards in these construction classes.
Absolutely.
And so how do we give credit? Because at that time, 10 years ago or 8 years ago, whenever it was, students who were taking those courses were getting elective. They were not getting courses. What I don't want to see is, and so I want people to be courageous, and I think part of that, you were talking about telling the story, is sharing the innovations in districts of how they've sat down to identify what are those third-year math and fourth-year math, third-year reading, language arts, and fourth-year courses. What I don't want it to be absent of is rigor of the standards, because we can get into exciting learning opportunities without meeting an expectation. And the thing that sticks out in my mind, I am a data nerd as well, and I also like to read effective research. And one of that is from 2018, so it's not even new, but the opportunity myth that was written and done,
new
the
teacher
research,
project.
TNTP did 5,000 evaluations in classes, bell to bell. So it's not about test scores at all. And students met the level of expectation in that classroom. But when they moved on into training or post-secondary, 2-year, 4-year proprietary school, whatever it was, they weren't ready.
Yep.
Many of them weren't ready because they did not have the level of rigor of courses to truly prepare them for their proprietary school, their training, their 4-year, their 2-year. So I don't want us to be in that situation that we overlook that, but that is an expectation. And Lou, you mentioned that in the portrait.
Yep.
But let
that
me
there's
say this, and
academic
then I do want to hear from John. And
Yep.
I'm going to give Governor Coleman a chance to chime in here. You know, I think getting back to some of the heart of what we have to do is to keep reminding ourselves that engagement is one of the key things we're trying to foster
right.
here.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think there is research that will back this up, but to me, it's just a common sense kind of thing. As engagement rises, rigor can also rise.
Agreed.
All right, so we don't have to think about this as one or the
Exactly.
other.
I don't want one
It's
to
a
be
ye-
lost.
it's yes,
Those kids
yes,
are learning
and.
those
Mhm.
physics processes because they're engaged
That's right.
in the coursework they're doing. Now,
And
you put them in a
authentic.
physics classroom and try to teach that, and they're just going to shut down. All right, so as engagement rises, those expectations can also rise. And I think, Jesse, that helps with some of the things you were talking about and helping lead instructors there. But let's
If I could
also take
add,
a minute.
And an example that I used earlier with Madisonville North Hopkins, the old math teacher got to go in and teach some trigonometry to the ag class,
Absolutely.
the carpentry class, and this was higher level. How do you apply what you're learning? So there was trigonometry, and this was their geometry credit. But they were doing geometry, trigonometry, and then going straight into the next classroom and applying that.
Absolutely.
So still that high level.
That's how it should be.
It's
That's right.
pushed up and making sure, I'd say a lot of these kids, that I saw, they may or may not take college algebra, but they will be ready for it.
And we also have
the
that
data will
indicator.
show that most students don't need to take college algebra. When you also, Lakeisha, match that up against the Kentucky job profile to show what educational attainment is required to fit the majority of the jobs, and as we do a better job of getting them engaged in setting the local curriculum, then I think, Jesse, we can get some of that alignment. I mean, this is a multi-pronged wheel here.
And to Dr. Ellis's point, I reviewed this data last night in our new school report card. We have a whole set of data in the report card attached to advanced coursework opportunities for high school kids in Kentucky, which includes dual credit
Yes.
and international baccalaureate and advanced placement. And all of those opportunities for kids to stretch and be stretched in the process as well. So couple that with our efforts around increasing rigor in career tech ed, and we're talking about a more vibrant experience for every learner. But I agree, it's not an either or, it's a yes and as we move forward.
So, John, what are your thoughts here?
Well, if I could chime in here, and I apologize, I'm gonna have to leave here in about 5 minutes to get to a meeting in Bowling Green, but I want to go back to something I guess Dr. Pate started us off with when we're talking about leveling the arena right now, in that what can we already do? And about 2 summers ago, I spent seems like my entire summer kind of doing a deep dive into this subject as far as what type of innovation programs are out there across the nation, looking in South Carolina, Indianapolis has a lot, Georgia, Louisiana, to work with Senator West to craft legislation that we passed last session, the Schools of Innovation Act, to hopefully stimulate some of the things that we're talking about right now. I think Dr. Fletcher hit on it. One of the keys is, how do we incentivize that? You know, we've got pockets of that happening across the state, but how do we do that in a larger scale? And I think that's probably will be our next policy type, I guess, push would be, after we've laid the groundwork for the schools of innovation, how do we then incentivize folks to do that? Because as much as I hate to say it, I think part of our biggest problem in education is we become complacent. We become comfortable in what we're doing, but we've got pockets of folks who, we've got innovative leaders who are willing to push the envelope a little bit, who are willing to, as Jesse said, kind of make folks uncomfortable a little bit and willing to move forward with some innovation. So I think the next thing we need to do is look at how do we incentivize folks to do these things. You know, in our Schools of Innovation Act, we've set out, and Commissioner Fletcher has done a great job in kind of overseeing the regulations that'll kind of govern that. But you all as the State Board of Education would be the ultimate gatekeeper to make sure that rigor is still there. You know, but again, I think the opportunities are there. But how do we push it forward? How do we incentivize those things?
Yes, sir.
And John, to add to that, you know, sometimes incentivize may also mean make it possible. Sometimes there's just not the funding there. You know, districts prioritize, and again, our legislature has increased the Pew Purple allotment in SEEK over the past 2 years, and we appreciate that. But again, when you're looking at trying to give opportunity to students, the incentives may be a financial incentive to help districts to offer those additional opportunities if they can, or to broaden the opportunities. So again, incentivize, we can look at it 2 different ways. One, incentivize to encourage districts to do it, but also for some districts to make it possible.
I'll jump
Well,
in.
and that was kind of my underlying, I guess, without overtly saying, you know, what the next policy step is how do we create a system where even monetarily, you know, do we make a SEEK add-on if you've got an innovative program? That's a very generic, but, or maybe if you've got your local community who's willing to, you got an industry or business that's willing to chip in. How do we, you know, match those fundings or something of that nature? So I certainly hear what you're saying about the incentivizing part, and that's kind of what I'm hoping will be our next steps. Is we've laid some groundwork. Now, how can we push this forward? And typically that's going to be through funding a unique program in some way.
Yeah. I'll jump in here and say I led the Portrait of a Learner work in my district when I was an assistant principal. And so I walked the entire faculty through the process. They were so excited and they were engaged. Getting teachers engaged in a teacher meeting is about as hard as getting kids engaged in class sometimes, but they were excited and engaged. And when we got to the point where I said, now what do you have to do in your classroom to bring this to life? Mm-hmm. And everybody looked like a deflated balloon because they were like, I want to do this, but I feel like I can't. I feel like I don't have the time. I feel like, you know, all of these limitations because of what they perceive to be a system of assessment and accountability that is limiting. Now that's changed. I know we've moved from there into more of a growth model, and I know it will keep evolving. But I think part of that is how we've allowed the system to be talked about. We have not taken the narrative and explained this is a snapshot. This is formative data. And when we don't do that at the grassroots level, I've been in the teachers' meetings where they've wheeled in a cake and they've patted us all on the back and they've told us how great we did because our scores went up, right? And then I've been in meetings where it's been like doomsday. No cake in that meeting, in doomsday, and we're compared to the other school in the district. You know, it's if we allow this system to be limiting rather than informative, then what ends up happening all the way up here where I am is it's weaponized and it's used to score political points. And that's the biggest shame of all, right? And so when it comes to creating more student agency, that's going to come when our teachers feel like they have agency and our school administrators feel like they have agency. And everybody doesn't feel like they're constantly judged by a system that was never meant to be a 1 to 171 number rating, right? And no one's going to do that for us. The education community, the people who support this work are going to have to take that back, redefine it, explain growth and how we're now looking at kids differently and classrooms and schools differently, because until our schools and the people in them feel like they have room to grow, they're never going to, right? Which means our kids are never going to grow. And so a lot of this is narrative, and a lot of this is taking what we've developed and implemented and taking ownership of it, of the narrative about it, and making sure that we are using it as a tool to improve, because that's what it is, rather than a tool to punish.
You're here, and I think when we talk to local accountability districts like Bullitt, for example, the message is, how do we take back the narrative around what school success looks like? So what does high school success look like? Again, not in an anti-reading and math test scores kind of a world. It's yes and again, but how do we get really clear about what success looks like for every learner at Bullitt East, at Nelson County, at East Jessamine High, et cetera? And that's a big part of the message I think that we'll want to think about throughout our time together.
Yeah.
Oh, this is all great, and I think as we're pulling all this stuff out, you know, we're also pulling out some of these barriers, you know, that exist in reality that we need to look at. So
I didn't mean to jump straight to barriers. Sorry.
No.
I don't think you did. I think you know, through that narrative,
Opportunities.
those things come out. You know, it's just like what Jesse was saying. You know, Jesse wasn't saying that as a negative. Teachers do need time.
Yeah.
But all of us need to recognize that.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't need to make a 180-degree flip on a policy because it's not working right this minute. When people are trying, it's just it's going to take some time to get that agency.
Yeah.
You know, all of these things matter.
I wonder if we have time for Chris and Lakeisha and Corinne to each weigh in. Is that where you're going?
Yes.
Oh, excellent, thank you.
I four points for me. And in terms of those best practices, I wrote down expose and entice employers. So if we're talking about someone like me with young kids and I'm moving into this area, I want to know from how do I get the information about what the school is doing to help educate my child? How do we expose employers to better their knowledge for their workers coming in? What are the opportunities for your children to learn these industries, these skills, these durable skills? And in doing that, how do we validate that transcript, to your point, Dr. Young, to where it speaks to the employer? I used to credential evaluate international transcripts and try to translate that into the U.S. style, or international students coming to the U.S. on an F1 visa.
Yeah, we do that stuff all the time.
Right, right. And it's even different states. Again, those curriculums are different. So you're having a student from a different state coming to Kentucky, and I used to admit them into our university and try to discern what their credentials looked like. So how do you validate with confidence? Employers can look at a transcript because they're not looking at GPAs and credit hours.
Right.
They're looking at skill. So how do we take those durable skills and translate that into a transcript, work-based learning hours, the leadership skills that we talked about?
What evidence?
Exactly. how do we build in a racy, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed industry-led project in those curriculums so that those practitioners that are hard to find in the classroom at the CTEs and the ATCs, how do we develop those projects with their involvement, right? Just like we do with any other project, someone's responsible for it, someone's informed, consulted, and accountable to those things, right? How does the student learn those particular pieces? And then from my own experience, I spent my whole middle school here in Kentucky, but then moved to Germany as a military brat, more brat than anything probably, and spent my first 3 years of high school in a DoD school, a Department of Defense
DoD.
school. Came back to Kentucky my senior year to graduate from North Hardin in Hardin County. My guidance counselor didn't realize that I did not fulfill my portrait of a learner requirement at that time, my portfolio, until my spring semester.
Yikes.
So student mobility is what my question. My coaches talk about, well, my students started at this school, but they're over here now. They might be from the A1 to the A5 to any number of different schools in that 4-year period, or from 6th to 12th grade. They might move districts. My son was at Jefferson County. We're now in Bullitt County. So we moved. So how do we take the data and show that student mobility is not diminishing the innovation that we're trying to achieve here, right? Regardless of moving districts, regardless of moving high schools in the districts, different environments, our coaches are very much invested in those A5 environments because the career coaching is happening mostly in the A1 environments or in the academies or the magnet schools, right? So
Scalability.
how do you go into a TAP, right? How do I go into a Minor Daniels and a Breck Metro in Louisville and then support those youth that have specific barriers that need to be overcome, that must be a community-based solution?
That was
Right.
my number one barrier right
Yeah.
there.
Yes,
What
sir.
you just mentioned.
Yes, sir. And so I think that's,
Our Lady of
just to
Peace.
speak at everybody
We're
counts,
all
those
indoor.
coaches that come in become part of that incentive because they free up space for those teachers to do what they want to do, and then the coaches can spend time on the personalized attention the student needs to move forward, whether that's education, training, apprenticeship, employment, or some combination of all of that.
Yes, sir.
So
Lakeisha, let's move into the business and industry sector. Do you feel the business and industry community is aware of all of these options and opportunities?
Yeah, so I would plus one a lot of what Chris said, and to your specific question, short answer, no. I think the reality is you have a group of employers in different districts that are really involved, but it's like, how do you grow that awareness where employers truly understand the skills that are being developed that are universal, right? Like, what is the framework? What's the guarantees that can be expected? Especially as more employers move into skill-based hiring. I think what Chris mentioned in terms of like, what are the skills, that's going to become even more critical, especially as we look at AI and how that's going to advance what is necessary, because it's going to become harder and harder for employers to truly identify those technical skills, but those durable skills, those necessary critical thinking, problem solving, collaborative skills are going to start being more in high demand because they're going to need that learner or that worker to be flexible. I would also say, just based on working with employers, they're becoming a lot more interested in how do I get involved earlier? What's my role as an employer with a middle schooler? Right? Not just waiting till high school, because a lot of high schoolers, they've made their decision at that point. And I think, especially working with the Pritchard Committee on the meaningful diploma work, it became apparent that the role of the teacher had evolved tremendously. And I don't know if that evolution is something that employers truly understand. And even at that point, I was like, it would be so cool to do a portrait of a teacher.
Yeah.
Because again, I feel like that evolution of, just think of it, when you're an employer, you probably are connecting to what your experience in high school was and what your teachers did at that time. That's not necessarily the reality of today. So I think having the portrait of the learner is critical, but also the portrait of the teacher. And I think once we have those two things coupled with really identifying what are those durable skills that's a guarantee, that makes it really clear for the employer where and how they can engage.
That's wonderful comment, and I'm going to let Corinne speak real quick because we are almost out of time. But that portrait of a teacher comment, I think, has a lot of value, and Corinne, even to our world as we look at what we do.
We have a
But
couple districts with models.
yeah,
Logan
I love
County.
that. Corinne, you want to put a bow on these comments here?
Sure, and I wrote them down, so I'll try to be quick and efficient. So as far as the impact, I just want to echo the space that's needed in a teacher's everyday in order to do what is necessary to support project-based learning and the innovation that we're asking them to do. I really do want to emphasize also the policy mapping on those examples that were given today are fantastic examples of school district success working with communities. But what are the failed examples? And where can we map those failed examples? Can we find the failed examples, first of all, and map them against the policies in a way that shows where the policy barriers actually live? I think that's a really important exercise to really figure out where are people getting stuck, because we don't celebrate the stuck, and the stuck is just as informative as the success. And then the last one I just want to throw on the table is, what is the structural mechanism that affords our communities to present their needs and the assessment of their needs so that they can show districts, here's the opportunity for projects, and then districts can take the time to actually build out and maintain that competency and outcome that Amanda was talking about earlier, that fulfill both rigor and thoroughness in the project as it relates back to the competencies that are needed, right? So making sure that the robust educational experience covers the whole gamut, but is still based in that community need and project that would really help to elevate the whole of the communities, and probably also elevate teaching and schools within our communities who sometimes still get a bad rap around a lot of things, that they live in isolation in their communities and those sorts of things. And that's truly not what's happening when we look at some of these examples, especially the flooding example that's out in Barron County as well. And some of those really truly life impactful examples of high schools working really well with the communities based on the projects.
Excellent. I just want to piggyback on Corinne's comment there too. One of the things we have seen in the failed transformation efforts of the past decade is oftentimes when the high school leadership changes, the innovation fails. Leadership matters a lot in this process, and the it's written right here on
Leadership matters.
Leadership matters. I didn't look at
She
her
didn't
paper.
copy or anything. No.
But that is one of those things I think worthy of exploration as we think about sustainability. Paolo, I think NASB, our team there, really need to think about that. We've seen it when district leadership changes, when certainly high school level, school level leadership changes. There's a vulnerability that happens right there. And so, we need to be working with leaders to think about, what does this look like after you're not in that seat anymore?
And
I'll
Lou,
put
that's
something-
exactly, that's exactly what I meant by what's the structural mechanism
Right.
that allows the communities to present that, because right now it's very relational. And I love
Yep.
Kentucky for all the relational that is not represented pretty much anywhere else. But here, if we don't have that
Yep.
relationship, how is the school still going to be successful? And
Yep.
so I love our leaders. They're very important, but we've got to build support structures that exist
Thank you.
that allow the community to be successful minus the leader.
Broad ownership, agreed.
And I just phrased it differently. I put, make sure that it's systematized, it will survive without the individual.
Yeah.
Like if the individual leaves,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
system remains.
I'll add one other comment. Lakeisha, you'll be happy to know, we're also part of another national network on bringing career exploration into the middle school settings. So what does that look like? I think that is key to some of this work, is that foundational of, what are we doing to have not just career technical, and we probably should remove all the, when we say academic, other things of that nature, it's all career. We're talking about doctors, lawyers, or we're talking about welders and carpenters. It's all career oriented. But that being said, what does that exploration look like in a middle school setting? So that's our push also in other areas and other work too that ties into this. Dr. Hargis, who is our Associate Commissioner of Career Technical Education, is leading that work. So just something to remember as we move forward.
Can I
This is
just
great.
add to that real quick? I know we're way over time, Dr. Pate. But to your point, Commissioner, I'm a part of that group too. And the IOP, if we just can put a dot next to that, because that's been around for years and it's so villainized for compliance, and it's a missed opportunity for student agency. It's a missed opportunity for them to really explore their pathways and their interest. And it's an opportunity to address the truancy issue too, because we already know what 8th grade and 9th grade transition is.
Well, I
There's
think
tons
that's
of data.
Lose 'em.
that's a really good bow to put on this, because to me, part of that ILP villainization has been, it's been juxtaposed against a system that did
Right.
not support flexible innovation.
That's right.
You know,
That's
so
right.
as we are trying to work on that system, that ILP will
That's
really
right.
become a result of that system.
That is exactly right.
So I think, you know, I think we really hit on a lot of important things here today. And we brought out a lot of pieces that matter to this whole. And if we're trying to get to the whole of a more engaging high school experience, which is kind of the crux of this World Pilot, you know, it's, you know, getting that engaging high school experience, all of these other ships rise with that sea. So if we can stay focused on what, you know, what barriers exist to, what policy recommendations we need to have, and what best practice we need to share, then I think we will really start honing in on that engaging environment, and then work the peripheral of making sure all these pieces have the time and the resourcing and the support to get there. And this is a long game. Now, this is not, all right, let's pass a bill and make it happen. You know, this truly is. It's a relational, it's a leadership, it's an individual, it's all these things rolled into one. And I think about my journey as a teacher. You know, I woke up when I was 5 years old, and Mama sent me to school, and I went to a classroom. And until I was an ATC principal, I didn't get outside that classroom. I was there through college. I was there through my first job. I was a football coach, but my paycheck came from what I did inside that classroom. You know, everything was involved there. I didn't really see other ways of thinking, doing, being engaged with the business industry community until I got into the ATC environment. So I think as we think about the comments made today, that portrait of a teacher, the comments Jacqueline made about making sure it's not just the students that get agency, but the administrators and the teachers, you know, I think all of these are going to really help us frame some of this work. So let me close by saying this, and I'll see if anybody has any one last parting shots, and then that way it's your fault if we keep going over and not mine. But if you have other comments that you did not get a chance to make, but you feel are totally relevant to our policy recommendations, our looking at developing a set of best practice to share, or identifying barrier, and I do think that strengthening local engagement, I think that's going to fall in that best practice world. But if you have comments that you want to make sure that are included in this, just send them to Glyptis Ann, please, Glyptis Ann Jones. You all got her email. She's on the invites and so forth, and we'll capture those. But our next meeting is going to be Thursday, February 26th. We are hoping to do that at possibly Elkhorn Crossing, I believe is
Scott County.
in Scott County. We may do that somewhere else. We've been there before, Robert. But we would like to take this group out to a school and see, you know, some of these things, some of these possibilities. It's going to be one of many great exemplars, but we'll try to get that on location and get that information out to you as soon as possible. Please hold 9:30 to 11:30 on February 26th, if you possibly can, so we can get back together again.
Eastern.
Eastern Standard Time, yes, good call. Any parting shots?
Yeah, just as we used today we talked about Portraits of a Learner as kind of our springboard of our conversation. Our next two topics, if we're going with the Innovation Learning Guide, is centered around local assessment, accountability, and innovation, and effectively using funding to support personalization. Now, we can go in other directions, but if you look at those two parts with the Innovation Guide and any related information, that'll serve as our springboard, as our foundation for our next meeting.
And I just want to reiterate, take a chance and look through that Innovation Guide if you have not. There are some really powerful things that are possible for us in the Commonwealth, and a lot of that is outlined in this Innovation Guide. Anybody else for the good of the group?
One more, I'm sorry. Also, too, along the lines of local assessment accountability, our Division of Innovation also has a local accountability toolkit to help districts to develop their local accountability models. That's on our website. If you have the opportunity, I think that would be something else to look at too. I apologize, and I'll stop.
Great. All right. God bless you. Thank you. And look forward to continuing this work with you. Take care, you all.
Thank you.